Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi has finally released the Epstein list, a collection of 300 politicians and prominent people who were named in the files, telling Congress that all the documents the Department of Justice was required to reveal have now been made public. Kinsey, are there big names that are going to be worried about this release?
I mean, I think we had this conversation last week where Joe Rogan was like, look, I'm on the list, and because I refuse to meet with him. And that's what we're seeing, a lot of pushback, because there are a lot of names. Meghan Markle's on this list. There are a lot of names on this list, and they are people that in no way, shape, or form had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein. So I would beg people to keep that in mind before judging someone because their name is on the list. Jeffrey Epstein cultivated powerful contacts everywhere, from politics to business to entertainment. The real question investigators look for is evidence of criminal participation, not just association. So yes, prominent names do appear on this list, but what matters legally is whether there's proof tied to actual offenses.
Welcome to Dr. John Podcast. So this has happened right now. Pam Bondi walked into a congressional hearing confident, but got blindsided by a Republican prosecutor who exposed her on live TV, proving with hard evidence that she had been lying to Congress for weeks. Let me take you inside this disaster. Bondi walked into that hearing and claimed she had released all the Epstein files, everything the Department of Justice has. Nothing is being hidden.
Now, sources told the UK Times that King Charles did not contribute to the $12 million payout made by his brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, to settle a case brought against him by Virginia Giuffre, who accused the former prince of having sex with her when she was just 17 years old. And she said she was trafficked to London by Jeffrey Epstein. Kinsey, there's no doubt that this whole issue is having a detrimental effect on the royals. We saw King Charles, I should say, heckled last week. I mean, that doesn't happen to the royals. He was asked about when he knew about his brother's association with Jeffrey Epstein. How are they going to handle this going forward?
She said it with confidence. She looked at the cameras. She wanted everyone to believe that the transparency fight was over and that she had done her job. And then a Republican lawmaker who happens to be a former prosecutor stood up and pulled out a list of specific documents that Bondi never released, internal memos, draft indictments, DOJ emails, stuff that the law explicitly requires her to turn over, and Bondi had no answer.
First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond to this story, because I found out about the original accusation in real time and I reacted organically. I was like, I'm horrified. I can't defend the royal family anymore. But here we have the royal family and King Charles specifically saying, actually, I did not contribute. And this distinction matters enormously for the monarchy. If the king didn't personally fund Andrew's settlement, it reinforces the palace's position that Andrew's legal problems are his own responsibility. The king has spent years trying to slim down the working monarchy and distance the institution from scandal. Financial separation is part of protecting the Crown's credibility. And again, exile, exile, exile. We don't want to see Andrew. We don't want to hear from him. And it's my understanding he's currently under investigation and potentially in trouble for sharing government secrets. So it might not be so easy to get rid of him.
She just sat there as her entire defense fell apart on live television. This is huge because Bondi has been hiding behind this claim for weeks. Every time someone asked about the Epstein files, she gave the same response. We released everything. There's nothing more. Stop asking. And now a member of her own party has proven that is not true. The shield she was hiding behind is gone, and she has no idea what to do next. Let me give you the full picture of what happened.
Turning now to another major story that we are continuing to follow as we take a live look on Capitol Hill. This, as Attorney General Pam Bondi has announced in a letter that all Epstein files have been released consistent with Section 3 of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. That letter addressed to Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, Ranking Member Dick Durbin, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, and Ranking Member Jamie Raskin was obtained by Fox News Digital. That letter includes a list of more than 300 high-profile names, including President Trump, Barack and Michelle Obama, Prince Harry, Bill Gates, Woody Allen, Kim Kardashian, Kurt Cobain, Mark Zuckerberg, and Bruce Springsteen. In accordance with all Epstein Files Transparency Act, the list of names includes all persons who they are or were a government official or politically exposed person, and their names appear in the files released under the act at least once, adding that the names appear in a wide variety of contexts. Meanwhile, this comes as the fallout continues, as Republicans and Democrats alike have raised concerns. Some say too much was withheld and redacted. Others, though, are worried about victims' privacy and potential political weaponization of the files. This also comes as Attorney General Pam Bondi testified before the House Judiciary Committee this past Wednesday on topics including Epstein and accusations of a weaponized Justice Department.
Bondi sent Congress a letter claiming that all Epstein files held by the DOJ under the Transparency Act had been released. She included a list of names that appear in the documents, and she basically said, "We are done. There is nothing else. Stop asking." But Congress was not buying it because the files Bondi released were heavily redacted, huge sections blacked out, key names missing. Lawmakers from both parties kept saying, "This does not look like everything. This looks like you are still hiding stuff." And Bondi kept insisting, "No, we released everything the law requires."
To speak more on this, I do want to bring in political analyst Rich Rubino to our show. And Rich, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.
Sure.
So I do want to start out with the significance in this ongoing case. I mean, this case and the controversy has been going on for months now. Attorney General Pam Bondi is now saying that all of the files have been released, but there continues to be a push for greater transparency and greater accountability from both Republicans and Democrats. From a political standpoint, how significant is all of this?
It's very significant because I think you're seeing a few fractures in the conservative, in the MAGA base. Some in the MAGA world, this is not really necessarily an ideological issue. It's just about transparency. It's not like, should you raise taxes? Should you decrease taxes, abortion, gay marriage, anything like that? This is more about transparency. And I think consequently, some of the more conservative members like Nancy Mace, a congresswoman from South Carolina who's currently running for the Republican nomination to become governor of South Carolina, has said that she has no confidence in Pam Bondi. Congressman Thomas Massie, who's very much a libertarian-type Republican, has been very critical of President Trump, very critical of Pam Bondi, and but critical on Donald Trump and other issues as well. And he actually has a major primary opponent that's supported by Donald Trump and supported by some Republicans like Andy Barr. But this is very much, I think, an issue where I think Republicans it's very hard to come out and try to say that, and it's very hard for them to, I think, defend Pam Bondi. That's why you're seeing some Republicans at least kind of equivocate and saying that there should be more transparency, and we'll see what the reaction among the Republican Party is about the announcement by Pam Bondi today.
There's nothing being withheld. Well, that claim just got demolished. At a follow-up hearing, that Republican lawmaker came prepared. He had internal DOJ inventories. He had oversight correspondence. He had specific citations to documents that Bondi never turned over. And he went through them one by one in front of Congress and the cameras. An 86-page prosecution memo from the Southern District of New York, a draft indictment from Florida targeting Epstein co-conspirators, internal DOJ emails discussing why certain people were not charged, all of it specifically referenced in prior litigation and internal records, all of it required under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and none of it released by Bondi's DOJ. And the lawmaker did not just say these documents exist, he proved it. He cited the specific case files where they are mentioned. He referenced the internal inventories that list them. He showed that DOJ knew about these documents, cataloged them, and deliberately chose not to include them in the public release. So Bondi cannot claim she did not know they existed. She cannot claim they are not relevant. She cannot claim anything except that she got caught lying to Congress about releasing everything. And this was not some Democrat trying to score political points. This was a Republican, someone who should be on Bondi's side. But he was so fed up with the cover-up that he brought the receipts and exposed her in public. And Bondi had no good answer. She tried to claim that some documents are protected by deliberative process privilege, which is a legal doctrine that protects internal government discussions. But the problem with that defense is that the Transparency Act specifically overrides those protections for Epstein files. The law says you have to release internal memos and emails explaining why prosecutors did or did not charge people. That is literally in the statute. So Bondi cannot hide behind deliberative process. The law stripped that protection away, and she knows it, but she is still trying to use it as an excuse because she has got nothing else. This revelation destroys Bondi's entire defense strategy. For weeks, she has been telling Congress and the public that everything has been released. Full transparency. Anyone complaining is just being political. But now we have proof that is not true. We have specific documents that she withheld. We have evidence that she knew these documents existed and chose not to release them. And we have a member of her own party calling her out for it in public. The contempt case against Bondi just got way stronger. Before, she could claim it was complicated and she was doing her best. But now Congress can point to concrete examples where she lied about what she had released. That is not a compliance issue. That is obstruction. And the implications are massive. If Bondi lied about these documents, what else is she lying about? What other files is she hiding? Are there more memos, more emails, more draft indictments? How many names are still being protected? And who are those names? Because the documents Bondi is hiding apparently explain why certain Epstein associates were not charged. That means there are people who prosecutors thought could be charged, but decided not to. And Bondi is sitting on the memos that explain who those people are and why they got a pass. That is exactly what Congress and the public demanded transparency about. And Bondi is the one blocking it. So now she is facing even more pressure. The contempt proceedings that were already moving forward just got a huge boost. Congress can now point to specific lies Bondi told. They can show she misled them about what was released. And they can argue that her continued refusal to turn over these documents is willful obstruction that deserves the harshest penalties. Daily fines, detention, impeachment, all of it is back on the table. And this time, Bondi does not have the defense that it is just politics. A Republican prosecutor is the one who exposed her. Her own side turned on her. And that makes this so much worse for Bondi politically and legally. Let me dig into exactly what documents Bondi is hiding and why this is such a big deal. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was not just about releasing investigative files like police reports and witness statements. It specifically required DOJ to release internal documents explaining prosecutorial decisions, why certain people were investigated, why some were charged and others were not, what evidence prosecutors had, what legal theories they considered. All of that had to be made public under the law. And that is the stuff Bondi has been hiding. The first major document that is confirmed missing is an 86-page prosecution memo from the Southern District of New York. This is a detailed internal document that prosecutors wrote analyzing the Epstein case and making recommendations about who should be charged. These kinds of memos are incredibly important because they lay out the evidence prosecutors had, the potential charges they considered, and the reasons for their decisions. And in the Epstein cases, those memos would identify other people who were involved or complicit, associates, enablers, maybe even clients. All of that would be in a detailed prosecution memo. And we know this memo exists because it is referenced in court filings from Epstein-related civil cases. Lawyers representing victims cited it. Judges acknowledged it. It is part of the official record that this document exists. So Bondi cannot claim it does not exist or that it is just speculation. The memo is real. DOJ has it, and Bondi chose not to release it. The second major missing document is a draft indictment from Florida targeting Epstein co-conspirators. This is also confirmed to exist through court references and internal DOJ records. A draft indictment means prosecutors got far enough in their investigation to actually write up formal charges against specific people. They identified co-conspirators by name. They laid out the criminal conduct. They prepared to go to a grand jury. But then something happened and the indictment was never filed. Maybe political pressure. Maybe a deal. Maybe someone powerful intervened. We do not know. But the draft indictment would tell us who those co-conspirators were and what they were going to be charged with. And that is explosive information. If prosecutors were ready to charge Epstein associates and then backed off, the public deserves to know who those people are and why they were not prosecuted. Were they protected because of their wealth, their political connections, their relationship with someone in power? The draft indictment would answer those questions, and Bondi is sitting on it. The third category of missing documents is internal DOJ emails discussing prosecutorial decisions. According to the Republican lawmaker who exposed this, there are extensive email chains between DOJ officials, FBI agents, and prosecutors discussing the Epstein investigation and related cases. These emails would show the internal debate about who to charge, what evidence they had, what obstacles they faced, and potentially who was putting pressure on them not to charge certain people. This is the kind of behind-the-scenes transparency that the Transparency Act was designed to force into the public. But Bondi has been hiding behind deliberative process privilege to keep these emails secret. Deliberative process is a legal doctrine that protects internal government discussions so officials can have candid debates without everything becoming public. And normally, that is a valid privilege. But Congress specifically wrote the Transparency Act to override that privilege for Epstein files. The law says internal memos, emails, and notes have to be released even if they are normally protected. Congress wanted to strip away the usual protections so the full truth would come out. So Bondi cannot legally use deliberative process to hide these emails. The statute overrides it. But she is trying to do it anyway. She is claiming that some internal discussions need to remain confidential. But that directly contradicts what the law says. And when the Republican prosecutor called her out on this in the hearing, pointing to the specific language in the statute, Bondi did not have a good answer. She just kept repeating that DOJ is following the law and protecting sensitive information. But that is not what the law allows. The law says release everything, and she is not doing it. Now let me talk about the redactions, because that is another huge problem. The files Bondi did release are heavily redacted. We are talking about huge black boxes covering names, entire paragraphs blacked out, key details missing, and when Congress asked why so much was redacted, Bondi claimed it was to protect victim privacy and ongoing investigations. But legal experts say that does not justify the extent of the redactions we are seeing. Victim names can be redacted. That is legitimate. But you cannot redact the names of perpetrators and associates. That defeats the entire purpose of transparency. And we know from lawmakers who have seen unredacted versions that the names being hidden are not just victims. At least 6 prominent names were redacted from documents where members of Congress later read them into the public record. So these are names of people connected to Epstein's operation, people who were involved or knew what was happening. And Bondi is hiding them, claiming they need protection for reputational reasons or because they were not charged. But again, the Transparency Act does not allow that. The law says release the names of people who were investigated or mentioned in connection with Epstein, whether they were charged or not. And here is what makes this even more suspicious. Bondi released a list of names that appear somewhere in the files, but that list is basically useless without context. It does not tell you what each person's connection to Epstein was, whether they were victims, witnesses, associates, or clients. It is just names with no information. And critics are saying Bondi did that deliberately. She can claim she released names to technically comply with the law, but without the context from the memos and emails she is hiding, the names do not mean anything. It is a way to look transparent while actually still covering up the most important information. And the Republican prosecutor who exposed all this made that exact point in the hearing. He said Bondi is playing word games, claiming she released everything while withholding the documents that actually explain what happened. And he pointed out that this is exactly the kind of cover-up the Transparency Act was designed to prevent. The political fallout from this is severe. Bondi is not just facing pressure from Democrats anymore. She has got Republicans calling her out publicly. The prosecutor who exposed her is a conservative. He is someone who should be defending her. But he was so bothered by the cover-up that he brought receipts and humiliated her in public. That tells you how bad this is. When your own party is turning on you, when people who should be allies are exposing your lies, you are in serious trouble. And this completely changes the contempt proceedings. Before, Bondi could argue that compliance was complicated and she was doing her best. But now Congress has proof that she lied. They can point to specific documents she said did not exist or were not required that actually do exist and are required. They can show she misled them about what was released. That is not a good faith disagreement about the law. That is obstruction. That is contempt. And it makes the case for holding her accountable much stronger. The other thing this does is fuel impeachment talk. Lying to Congress is serious. Misleading lawmakers in testimony is potentially a crime. And if Bondi continues to refuse to release these documents even after being exposed, that could be an impeachable offense. High crimes and misdemeanors include obstructing congressional oversight and defying federal law. Bondi is doing both. So the calls for impeachment that we're already building are going to get much louder now, especially with Republicans joining in. All of it just got more serious because Congress now has proof she lied. Let me explain why Bondi's claim that she released everything was so important to her defense. She has been under enormous pressure for months to release the full Epstein files. Congress passed a law with a hard deadline. She missed it. She only released partial files with heavy redactions, and lawmakers from both parties accused her of covering up for powerful people. Bondi's response was always the same. We released everything we are required to release. Nothing is being hidden. Anyone saying otherwise is being political. That became her shield, her way of deflecting criticism and justifying why she was not facing consequences yet. But that shield just got destroyed. A Republican lawmaker with prosecutorial experience who knows how DOJ works came to a hearing with specific evidence that Bondi's claim was false. He cited the 86-page SDNY prosecution memo. He referenced the Florida draft indictment. He pointed to internal email chains. And he showed that all of these documents are mentioned in court records, internal DOJ inventories, and oversight correspondence. They exist. DOJ has them. And Bondi chose not to release them. So her entire defense, the idea that she released everything, is now proven to be a lie. And she cannot claim she did not know these documents existed because they are cataloged in DOJ's own records. The fact that this came from a Republican is devastating for Bondi politically. She could dismiss Democrats as partisan. She could claim they are just attacking her because she works for Trump. But when your own party members are calling you out, when conservatives who should be defending you are instead exposing your lies, that is a different situation entirely. It means the cover-up is so obvious, so egregious, that even Republicans cannot defend it. And that isolation is dangerous for Bondi because it means she cannot count on party loyalty to protect her anymore. She is on her own. And the consequences are closing in. Let me tell you what these missing documents would reveal. The 86-page prosecution memo from SDNY would explain what evidence prosecutors had against Epstein and his associates. It would identify people who were investigated. It would lay out potential charges. It would explain why certain people were or were not prosecuted. This is exactly the kind of transparency the public has been demanding, because there have always been suspicions that powerful people were protected, that certain names were kept out of charges because of political connections or wealth or influence. The prosecution memo would confirm or deny those suspicions, and Bondi is hiding it. The draft indictment from Florida is even more explosive. A draft indictment means prosecutors were ready to charge specific people, they had evidence, they had legal theories, they prepared formal charges, but then something happened and those charges were never filed. The draft would tell us who those people were, what they were going to be charged with, and potentially why the charges were dropped. Was it a plea deal? Was it political pressure? Was it lack of evidence? We do not know because Bondi will not release it. But the existence of a draft indictment targeting co-conspirators tells you that prosecutors believed they could prove criminal conduct by multiple people beyond Epstein himself. The internal DOJ emails would show the behind-the-scenes discussions. Who was pushing to charge people? Who was pushing back? What political or institutional pressures prosecutors faced? Whether anyone from the White House or Congress or anywhere else tried to influence prosecutorial decisions. This is the kind of information that exposes corruption and cover-ups. And that is exactly why Bondi does not want it public. Because if those emails show that powerful people intervened to protect Epstein associates, that is a massive scandal. That is the kind of thing that brings down administrations. And Bondi's defense for hiding all this has been deliberative process privilege. She claims internal DOJ discussions need to remain confidential so prosecutors can do their jobs. But that argument does not work here because Congress specifically wrote the Transparency Act to override deliberative process for Epstein files. The law says you have to release internal memos, emails, and notes, even if they are normally protected. Congress anticipated that DOJ would try to hide behind privilege, so they stripped it away in the statute. And when the Republican prosecutor pointed this out in the hearing, Bondi did not have a counter-argument. She just kept insisting DOJ is following the law. But the law clearly says she is not. The bottom line is this: Bondi's entire defense strategy just collapsed. She claimed she released everything. A Republican prosecutor proved that was a lie. And now she is facing consequences that include fines, detention, and impeachment. The files she is hiding apparently explain why certain Epstein associates were not charged, who they are, what evidence existed against them, and who made the decision to let them walk. That is exactly what the public demanded transparency about, and Bondi is the one blocking it. Congress is moving forward with the harshest penalties available, and Bondi is running out of places to hide.